Welcome, everyone. I am John Ryan. This is the Predictive Playbook NFL Sports Betting Show for Week 9. Hard to believe it's already Week 9, but it is. And we have some great bets for you. We went 2-1 last week. We're now hitting 70%. Our average went down, guys. We have to do better.
No.
But seriously, 70%. And even if we go 0-3, which could happen on any given Sunday, we're still clicking along pretty well here. And personally, my college football is on fire. I can admit it. I hate admitting it sometimes because I feel like the betting gods hear that and then they just kind of swallow you up and you have one of those 1-6 weekends. But it's a grind. Every week is it's really a mystery. Nobody has a crystal ball. There is no such thing as a lock except on your front door of your house. And that's all I have to say about that. But before we get started, just a quick little announcement here. We have an exclusive deal with BetUS for the show. It's 125% sign-up bonus. You just take your phone and scan that QR code, and it's very easy to sign up. A $50 deposit is the minimum. You can deposit up to $1,500 if you like, and instantly double it with very small rollover. And some of the other competitors are, 40 and 50 times rollover, which makes it very hard to actually take money out of the account after having to bet roughly $7,500 on a $100 deposit. So take advantage of this deal. I love them. They have great lines. Minus 107 VIGs instead of minus 110 makes a huge difference. And it's just another book to add to your existing accounts and get the best line possible. So here we are, gents. Before we get into NFL, there's just a little game going on Saturday. It has nothing to do with the NFL, of course, but it's drawing attention for some reason. It's number 4 against number 3, Penn State, Ohio State. Every year, this game seems to determine who's going to advance, and Ohio State has had the better end of it. But we'll start with Bo. I just want to know, for my own personal reasons, and for the listeners too, do you have a strong feeling on this game of which team's going to win and advance?
Yeah, I'm leaning Ohio State. For whatever reason, they seem to figure out this game. Even in years where they're not great, they figure this game out. And so that's the way I'm leaning on it. Obviously, they're both high-ranked teams. So, I mean, this one is probably a coin flip. Going to be a fun watch. But, I lean that way.
Bo, what do you think?
Well, I can be Bo for a minute. That's fine.
I'm sorry, Rudy.
I'll take Bo's stance on that. Penn State's going to win this one. Look, James Franklin has done an absolute fabulous job with this team. And you know what? This could be the birth of a Big Ten championship game. I'm just saying. There's a lot of things to like. Ryan Day and Ohio State are kind of trying to climb through the muck of things right now, trying to figure things out. Penn State just looks more prepared, more ready. I know that adds another log in the fire of Ryan Day's, but I think there's a lot to like about this matchup. But I like Penn State in this, and I'm probably going to slightly lean if I was standing straight up and I'm in a music video. I'm going to stick with Penn State on that, even though Ohio State, it's like a 3.5 underdog. So I like Penn State in this one.
I do too, and quite frankly, I think the wrong team is favored in this matchup. That defense is the real deal, and it just seems like recency bias from previous seasons is affecting the lines on Penn State games. That it seems no respect. They're the number 3 team, and everybody seems to be thinking like, why in the world is this team ranked number 3? Well, there's a lot of smart people that do the polls, and they're number 3 for a reason, and I think they're really going to put on a good show tomorrow. Also, they've outstatted their opponents in every single game this year. Even Ohio State hasn't done that. And teams at this point of the season, guys, that have done that through 7 or more weeks, they hit against the spread 60% of the time. And we're talking about a dog here. ATS is most of the time these guys will be favorites because they have been so impressive in all of their games. There haven't been any letdowns. They outstat the opponent week after week after week. So we have a live dog here, I think. I think Penn State wins the game. But this is an NFL show, but that was good. I'm glad that we had that discussion, and I think it'll be very fun to watch. The only bad thing about it is at noon. Should be an 8 o'clock game, in my opinion. But anyway, let's move on to the NFL card here. We had a game last night. I guess it was a game. We had some great catches being made, but yeah, I felt I was on the Texans, and when they called back the field goal on the penalty, and then he clunks it from 27 yards off the post, that's never good. That would have made it 14-13. Maybe I still lose, getting the +2, but I'm covering after that. But that's a game I don't even think we need to really talk about right now, because it's this doesn't mean that the Jets are going to make the playoffs. They have no room for margin of error. They have to win, and I just don't think they're a team that's going to do that. I really don't. So let's go on to the first game here, which is the Rams and the Seahawks. And this is a very, very important game for both teams. One is going to take a large step forward in that division, which is really up for grabs given what the 49ers are doing. And let's start off with Bo here, and we'll go through and see what everybody thinks about this matchup and any possible betting opportunities.
Yeah, this is one that I would not put much money on. The divisional game, two very flawed teams, right? The Rams are coming back from injuries, but they have some holes in that roster. The Seahawks have a ton of injuries, added to the fact that they have, bottom units, on both sides of the, offensive line, defensive line. But, to your point, this game is incredibly important for both of these squads, because with the trade deadline coming up Tuesday at 4 p.m. Eastern, whoever loses this game may become sellers, because obviously this is a very tight race for the West. Three of the teams are 4-4. The Rams are only 3-4 because they had their bye week already. If the Rams win, that's huge for them. Divisional win. If the Seahawks win, they need that divisional win, because the only divisional game they've lost. So everybody, both these teams really need it, but whoever loses this game probably looks at this trade deadline as reloading for next year.
Yeah, I agree. This is a very tough game to call. Before you go, Rudy, I'm going to share this little slide here. I have a little betting system. Rams, as you can see, 3-4. Those numbers are pretty self-explanatory. And again, this is over multiple years, so these trends don't carry that much weight, analytically speaking. But the system does, and it definitely favors the Rams using the money line. As long as I don't want to pay -140 or above, but if it's in that sweet spot of -135 and lower, I would much rather do that than lay the point. So you're going to bet on any team priced between a 6.5-point favorite and a 6.5-point dog. The game is a divisional matchup. The team is coming off a non-divisional game, which the Rams are, and the team has lost the last two meetings to the current foe. So we are 54-25 straight up, 68%. I love that number, especially when they're only favored by one, and 52-25 and 2 pushes also for 68% over the last 7 seasons. That says to bet the Rams using the money line. Do you agree with that, Rudy?
I'm probably going to err on the side of yes, and just barely. Look, this game is not for the faint-hearted. I would keep my money in my pocket in this one, divisional game or not. Bo mentioned the trade deadline. That's going to be the crux of these two teams, and I think there's going to be some swaps going on between these two teams because, well, why not, right? Your next door neighbor going to walk over there and ask for some sugar, and that's exactly what the Rams are going to do with the Seahawks. Now, some pieces I don't expect to move, and that's probably Jared Verse, a very solid defensive guy. I probably wouldn't give maybe even 2 first round, for either a first round or a second round pick for that guy. He's just an absolute stud. And no, you can't take the place of Aaron Donald. Sorry, Jared, but you're certainly going to climb up the ranks there. But I think the betting is very close in regards to what the ETS looks like. But I'll be honest with you, this game really doesn't have a lot of interest, at least not to me. And for those that are really looking at trying to make some serious money, I just don't see it, at least not in this matchup.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It's almost better to have a in-game betting than straight up betting.
Right.
You read my mind, Bo. How would you play it? Would you go against say the Rams score a touchdown first, would you then bet Seattle? And conversely, would you bet the Rams if Seattle scored first?
Yeah, I mean, you'd probably watch where that money line goes. It depends on how much it spikes. But yeah, that's probably the type of bets. Or you take some of the props that Cup scores the first touchdown or something like that. Probably some in-game bets as far as that goes. But yeah, straight up, I'd leave my money in my pocket because this is going to be a coin flip kind of game.
Okay, Rudy, anything else to add?
I did take the Seahawks here off of an absolute beatdown. A lot of times teams are a little more focused coming in.
Yeah, I think the only thing that I have in regards to additions to this game, maybe addition by subtraction, is see what kind of rushing yards the Rams could get on the ground. But my money would be on Walker for Seattle and one player prop bet to see what that looks like off the line. If he can get at least 100 yards, they could essentially win the game. Not convincingly, but win the game.
Yeah. Well, and the Rams aren't very good at the run, which is the biggest vulnerability for the Seahawks. So, I mean, again, they match up very well. So, I mean, it's going to be a fun game to watch. But, yeah, I mean, it's not a money winner for sure.
No, not even close.
Well, let's move on to one that might be. Let's see here my slides. That's the Colts. Then we have this is the next one. The Colts 4-4, 1-3 on the road versus the Vikings. A very intriguing matchup. Doesn't happen very often between these two teams, since Colts are 6-2 straight up against the spread versus the Vikings. Vikings went 5-0. Now they're on a 2-game skid, 3-1 at home. I think being at home is an excellent place to be for them to stop the losing streak. And there is a betting system, however, that fades the Vikings, and this would be very contrarian, at least from my perspective. The Colts just don't feel right when you look at the Vikings. The Vikings just seem to be head and shoulders better. But anyway, bet on road teams facing a strong home team that's outgaining their foes by 125 or more yards per game. The host is coming off a game in which they gained 7 or more passing yards per attempt. 55-62 straight up, 47%. But remember, we're playing money line dogs here too. Sprinkling the money line with these dogs is usually a pretty good thing over the course of the season. 66% on a 75-39 record is pretty darn good over the past 5 seasons. It tells us to bet the Colts plus the 6. It also targets our next game. I don't want to jump ahead, but it does target a very intriguing game, the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Eagles. So this system actually has 2 games targeted on week 9 action. Let's start with Rudy this time and see what he thinks of this matchup.
The Colts and Vikings, it's kind of a muck, right? You look at the Colts, they have quarterback questions. There's a lot of interesting components that they just don't have. Anthony Richardson wants to tap out. This isn't, cry uncle, and all of a sudden you get an opportunity to exit the game. It doesn't work that way. And somehow the Vikings decided to come back down to earth. Now they're the 5-2 Vikings. And what's interesting is obviously it didn't start that way. We don't know how it's going to finish. This season is still very long, even though we're headed into week 9. I like the fact that they're at home. It's a big deal for Skull fans. And I don't mean the ones that are chewing it. I mean the Vikings Skull fans. And what's really good about this is that they're going to right the ship. Literally, Vikings in the ship just makes more sense than probably any other analogy I've ever used. But 5-2 for the Vikings. I like the Vikings. I am certainly taking maybe some pizza money if the Colts can cover that bet, which I don't see happening. But again, they have Joe Flacco now under center, so we're going to see what that looks like from an offensive standpoint. We did have a taste of that before Anthony Richardson was able to get back on the field, but I like the Vikings in this one. I think Sam Darnold just burns the secondary early and often for Indianapolis to go and win another game. So if there's a player prop bet, maybe Jefferson for the Vikings, maybe he could get, I don't know, maybe 300-400 yards, something like that, some nonsense number. But for the Colts, they really don't have anyone outside of Pittman, who's been probably the most consistent wide receiver in that group. So I'm taking the Vikings on this one with some player prop bets for maybe a wide receiver named Pittman for Indianapolis.
Let's turn it over to Bo here. And one question for you, Bo. What do the Colts have to do to win this game? Is it really the market would say it's about a 25% chance that they win this game roughly? Mm-hmm. What would they have to do? Just win the turnover battle game for starters?
That is going to be a huge part of this game, is the turnover battle, especially because Flacco has a tendency to turn it over. Even when he was playing with the Browns and everybody thought he was great last year, if you look at his touchdown to interception ratio, it wasn't great. He was putting up yardage, but he wasn't exactly punching it in the end zone. And, he threw it to the other team, on a regular basis. So they're going to have to play almost perfectly. Whereas the Vikings, when you look at the roster, I mean, they're a better roster top to bottom, right? The only thing that the Vikings really have to worry about is that secondary. You can burn their secondary. But if the guys up front can get home, the secondary doesn't matter if Flacco's on the ground. He's not exactly a dynamic runner. So plus you have some of the chaos around how Richardson got benched, right? So it's not like it's, he got hurt, let's bring the backup in and rally around him. This was a weird scenario where he taps out, and it just is a strange way that it came together. And things like that typically create chaos. And as we've seen across the league over, forever, really, if there's a lot of noise off the field, it generally creates bad situations on the field.
Well, to your point, Bo, look at Kyler Murray and what happened when he scrubbed his social media, and he was looking for a new contract in Arizona, and it just looked ugly. It looked ugly more on him than it did the Arizona Cardinals. In this instance, also on the quarterback. Now, mind you, before he was ever drafted, Anthony Richardson, by the Colts, they knew this guy was a developmental quarterback. It's not as if he was a plug and play like a CJ Stroud was last year, right? Or what the Carolina looked for in Bryce Young. That didn't happen. So this is a huge this is a battle of attrition in regards to who wins this game. And I think Anthony Richardson needs some more time developmentally, sit behind Joe Flacco. But don't forget, this season's almost done. So he doesn't have a lot of time to go through the motions and say, okay, Joe, let me ride as fast as I can with every single note and nugget you have to give me. It's not going to work that way. So Vikings win. I think it's a very convincing win by Minnesota.
Yep.
I think I'm going to be with you guys. I mean, that's the point that I want to try to make with this. You can have analytics out the wazoo that lean one direction, but it has to match the fundamentals. And your two analyses, clearly, the fundamentals are very much in favor of the Minnesota Vikings. So good stuff. Let's move on to a game. I can't wait to hear what you guys think about this one, because you already know who I do like in this game, and it makes absolutely no sense. But let's see. The Philadelphia game is right here. Jaguars 2-6 with former Eagle coach and Super Bowl champion in 2018, Doug Peterson, on a very, very high temperature hot seat, for lack of a better way to describe it. I was trying to come up with something creative there, but they're 0-4 on the road. They're going to be facing the delightful fans of the Philadelphia Eagles, and I say that tongue in cheek, of course. It's a very tough place to play because the fans are so enthusiastic and passionate, and it's very tough. Period. Eagles are 5-2 now. Suddenly, 2-1 at home, but the Eagles haven't played really any good teams, right? They haven't. They're going to be playing Dallas on the road next week. That's going to be somewhat of a test, but we don't know how good Dallas really is. And it's a very confusing time, personally, for me to handicap any of these games. I just, the Eagles' schedule actually gets easier, if you can believe that. But they had the Browns. They lost to the Bucks. They beat the Saints, who are now 2-5 after a very impressive 2-0 start. So, what do you guys think the chances are that the Jaguars can actually pull off an upset win? And you can see by the system here, 16-7-1 against the spread, 70% winners. Tells you to bet the Jaguars, especially that hook. I like that hook, 7.5. Obviously, anybody with a brain likes the hook because you can get a late touchdown and all of a sudden the score is 28-21 and you cover. But is there any chance, Bo, that Jacksonville can actually win this game?
So the odds are low. And why I say that is they don't play a particularly good brand of defense. And that's going to be a problem with Saquon, right? They're not great against the run. They're not great against the pass. I mean, they really don't do anything well on that side of the ball. And then when you look at the offensive side of the ball, there's a lot of turnovers. You know, Trevor Lawrence is making bad decisions. They're finding ways to shoot themselves in the foot. 7.5 is, that hook is always appealing, but this could realistically still cover that. I would actually take the coverage. I think the Eagles probably win by 10. And again, only because the offensive side is making bad decisions. It's already a bad defense, and then they're out on the field even longer than they should be. So this realistically, especially when you look at the Eagles' last couple of weeks, Eagles should cruise here.
Well, Rudy, I think your mic is muted, by the way.
Yeah, it's muted. I had some things to say, but I muted myself just to make sure they didn't go on air. Look, bottom line is
Rudy has interviewed Ron Jaworski of Eagle fame. So that is one of the most impressive guests you must have had in your career. But, tell us what this game is going to, how it's going to go. And is Jacksonville going to play bad enough to get Mr. Peterson fired?
Mr. Peterson is not the guy that is going to be welcome into the neighborhood anytime soon. And I say that in a Philadelphia tongue-in-cheek kind of way because Mr. Rodgers was much better. I don't know that I like this game a whole lot, only because this is not the dogfight that I expected to see. And when you're a good team or a decent team, as the Eagles are facing off against a 2-6 Jacksonville team, that doesn't say a lot about your efforts. But we do know that Saquon Barkley is a guy who has nearly rushed for 1,000 yards already heading into week 9. So he's 6th in carries in the NFL. So I like the fact that Jacksonville can't stop a runny nose with a Kleenex. and the fact that can't happen, Saquon's just going to have a field day all over this. Now, mind you, there will be some pass attempts by Jalen Hurts, and it's going to look pretty for the most part. But, to be honest with you, I think this game looks closer than it actually is and could be a trap game for Philly. But I digress. Philly's going to take this one 24-10 in a game winner at home because it's just going to be that easy in the air. It's going to be that easy on the ground. You have the FedEx, player up top, and you have the ground and pounder like Saquon Barkley. So there's just no way Jacksonville is going to win this one.
Well, I'm thinking here, I was on a Las Vegas show. I'm trying to be respectful to Rudy, saying there's no way that they can do it. So you'll like this story. I'll do it quick. So I'm on the VSX radio show that Rudy is also on, and we ought to try to get Bo to join that one too on Saturday and Sunday.
It's fun.
It is fun. And Ronnie, who's he's a line maker in one of the casinos out there in Vegas, right? So he's on the show too, and we're going round table, and it was the Browns against it was the Raiders and the Ravens. And I said, this game, for some reason, to me, is going to be a lot closer than people think. Here's a betting system supporting the Raiders. And I said, don't be surprised if the Raiders win this game. It's there. You can fact check me if you want. So he says, John, with all due respect, there is no, freaking way the Raiders are going to win that game. And look what happened. But
there's always a chance. There's always a chance.
That's Jim Carrey. Whenever you're on a field, there is a chance. But I have a hard time believing that Jacksonville, they're not at home. Not that they played great at home either, but the fact that they're on the road playing against a formidable Eagles team that is on the rise and could put a staple win against Jacksonville if Jacksonville makes a lot of mistakes, which they really they have.
They will. Yeah.
in a very
Is
consistent manner.
Is it a staple win against the Jags? I mean, the Jags feel like that Alabama versus Tulane kind of game, right? Like if you win, cool, you're supposed to win. If you lose, they're like, oh, what's wrong with Alabama? Like nobody's paying attention to the Jags here. They're like, if you beat the Jags, they're like, oh yeah, I mean, that makes sense. And if you lose to them, they're like, what is wrong with your team?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And so I'm extremely confident in the fact that the Eagles can pull this off. The only way that they can lose this game is by bumbling and stumbling and all over themselves. And if they do that and allow Jacksonville to get early momentum, it's going to carry throughout the entire game, which I don't see a collapse here in any of the three phases for the Eagles.
The one thing they do need to do is figure out how to get in the end zone in the first quarter, though. That's something the Eagles haven't done yet this season, and that is a very real issue. It won't be against the Jags, but against teams that can actually score points, that's ultimately going to be a problem.
Well, you could probably thank Trevor Lawrence in advance for the interception that he will throw, and that will get picked off and go into the end zone.
I like that you're still not letting the offense of the Eagles score a touchdown.
Well, here's the
only
second
way.
betting system that I have on the Jaguars, and it does talk about the stumbling around that the Eagles have done pretty well at times in the early part of this season, going 5-2 despite these troubles. So bet on a road team that commits 1.25 or fewer turnovers per game. The opponent is forcing an average of 1.25 or fewer turnovers per game, which the Eagles defense has really not forced turnovers to happen at the rate you would think. Maybe that happens in this game. The team had 4 consecutive games, being Jacksonville, forcing no more than a single turnover. So it's kind of like a regression-progression type of situation where the Jaguars are actually expected now, based on this parameter, to force at least 1 or 2 turnovers. 16-7 for 70% against the spread. So I don't know. I think that in an ideal world, if the Eagles did score in the first quarter, then I would jump on the Jaguars maybe a little aggressively. But there has been no team in the history of the NFL to go 6, let alone 7 games without scoring in the first point and make the playoffs. The Eagles are probably going to be the first one to do it. But it also reflects parity in the NFL, where you can get away with playing stupidly bad against bad teams and you have a 5-2 record. I mean, honestly, which team is better? Minnesota's 5-2 record or the Eagles' 5-2 record? Or Green Bay's record better than the Eagles' record? I mean, there's no comparison, right?
Yeah, I mean, the Eagles are accidentally winning. But at the end of the day, they go down as dubs on the scorecard. So, it's
that doesn't mean they're going to make it in the playoffs, though. I mean, just because they're playing against bad teams and they end up with, let's just say 8-2, or let's just say they lose 1 here and there, that doesn't mean they're going to be formidable, because we know that the playoffs are a completely different animal. They don't have the mindset. They don't have the playmaking. I mean, they do have the playmakers, but they don't have the playmaking formula to get them past really good teams. I mean, look at the Steelers, 6-2. Who thought the Steelers would be at 6-2 at this point in the season? Nobody, maybe except for John and myself. Nobody picked them to be there at all. They have the best tandem in the AFC North, quarterback, backup situation, and they're a really good team. There have been times where they've been porous, not being able to stop the run. Okay, granted, but I mean, and there are lots of other teams that have much better and tougher schedules that play tougher competition. Steelers come back, they play the Commanders, then they go into interconference play with the Ravens and the Browns, and that's where you really test the mettle. The Eagles don't have that kind of schedule.
Yeah.
So I don't know how they're going to be taken seriously by beating Jacksonville and beat Cleveland. I mean, I just don't see that as a reality.
You can't have it both ways. You can't say that the Steelers, they play the Browns, and then the Eagles are like, they play the Browns. Like you can't pick the same team and have a different feel to it.
No, not at all. I mean, you have the feeling of what? Indigestion, maybe, if you're the Eagles. I mean, it's something they really need to take seriously and come up with a formidable, long-lasting solution in all 3 phases. you could take the small slivet of saying, we're going to score in the first quarter, and that's great and wonderful. Woohoo! Let's have a party. But stay consistent in all three phases, and you will see the results and feel consistent, and then end up being consistent.
So
it's tougher competition.
I definitely agree, but the Giants had showed us that as long as you get in the dance, you have a shot, right? Because those Eli Super Bowl runs, those teams were trash. Like,
yeah, right. You're absolutely right. They were a joke. And when you think to yourself, Eli Manning going to a Super Bowl, I mean, when someone said Peyton Manning, you're like, whoa, yeah, man, that guy, man, he'd tear you up. He's just they're two different players. I don't even think if Eli Manning came back that it would help this Giants team. Again, if he came out of retirement, because they're just that bad. You have Tracy Jr. and he was running all over the Steelers on some downs, not every down, but some downs, and then he ended up injured. Right, he had a concussion, and then you have. And I've said this before many times. Again, Daniel Jones is not it's not an NFL quarterback. He is a backup at best on any given team in the NFL, but not a starter. So
sure,
this
I only brought them up because of the parallel of if this Eagles team gets in the dance, they only have to play 4 good games, right? I mean, and that's essentially what that wild card Giants team did, because it's not like Eli did anything awesome that year. And so in this scenario, as long as you get in the dance, Hurts doesn't have to be awesome. He just has to get the job done.
Right, but then you have to count on the defense to help carry you on the other side of that ball to get the stops you need with better field position in order to get into the end zone or at least score points before the end of any given quarter. So your work is not in vain.
That's exactly what the Steelers did, because let's be honest, if the Steelers defense didn't score points in a couple of these games, they were losses.
Well, I don't know about that, because you look at the second half of that game, and Russell Wilson to George Pickens.
No, early in the season.
Oh, yeah, early in the game. Yeah, you put yourself 9-9 in the freaking halftime. Are you kidding me? I mean, it was absolutely ridiculous to suggest that the Steelers looked anywhere near the type of team. But, yes, if it wasn't for special teams, hence the third phase that the Eagles don't certainly have dialed out either, you can have the conversation as to whether or not the Steelers are even that good. But momentum shifts. We all know that. It happens at any given snap, anytime you're either at home or away. And I don't think there's a home field advantage. I think that's overrated, especially this year. Even with teams that have horrible records or ones that may think they're going to get in the playoffs, like the Jets. Good luck with that. So they won a game. They're 3-6. And does that mean they have to win out? Yeah, it does. Will they? Absolutely not.
Well, that's the closest thing to a lock right there. Them winning out is not going to happen.
That is not going to happen.
That should be a bet in of itself.
Oh, it is.
Well, there you go then.
That is a problem.
All my money's on that.
Yeah, exactly. Push the
Probably
chips.
have to lay like $1,000 to win 10.
Yeah, right.
That seems right.
I want the under.
I do like, in the prop bets, AJ Brown, his numbers are going to be inflated every single week.
Yeah.
And I have did some work on it before the show, and I'm leaning towards the under in his receiving yards. Just food for thought. I think you guys are right. I think Barkley's going to be a big part of the offense, and just grind and wear them down. And then it limits the passing opportunities. It could be another game where, like the Giants game, where Hurts threw for 14 passes and they won the game easily. And when you don't throw it, that limits the chances of getting interceptions. So I think Barkley's going to get a heavy dose of carries in this game for sure. Moving on to the last game now, which is the Chargers, the Bolts. Love that helmet. Definitely my favorite helmet. 4-3, 2-2 away. It's almost shocking to me, at least, that they are now 4-3 after the way they played to begin the season. They're going against the Browns, who on any given week have upset some really good teams and also have gotten destroyed by some bad teams. So that's why they're 2-6. They're 1-3 at home. That means they're 1-3 on the road too. But this system actually supports the Chargers. Bet against a team coming off 2 consecutive divisional games. The opponent is coming off a non-divisional game, which the Chargers are. Pretty simple to track. Very, very high correlation to wins. 29-10 straight up. That's 73% for the last 5 seasons. Tells us to bet the Chargers. And, the Chargers are a very small favorite here, and I think they are a tremendous value. Do you guys agree or not? Let's start with Rudy.
You're muted, bud.
One of those things where I just can't say what I want to say on a live stream. I don't even do it on TV. So I'll start there.
I was gonna say, this isn't network TV, so you get away with a little more.
Not much. I still have a reputation to uphold. So when you look at the Chargers at 4-3, that bolt is not going to carry them past a 9-volt battery. I mean, they just have not been the model of consistency when it comes to Justin Herbert under center. And I know they went in and got Jim Harbaugh, and that's great and wonderful, and that really hasn't yielded the type of results that you're looking for. Yeah, they're 4-3 and they're 2-2 away. But then you think to yourself, are these guys for real? Are they really going to show up? Well, they're in contention in the AFC West, at least to some extent, against a seemingly perfect Kansas City Chiefs team. And that's another topic I don't even want to go into. But the fact alone that the Chargers are 4-3 is a good sign. It's a good sign for San Diego, Los Angeles, and because they're not consistent, they belong in San Diego, and the Rams, well, they're stuck in LA, at least for the most part. Fans are fickle here in LA, so it is what it is. The Browns themselves have kind of had a staple win against an AFC North foe, right? They beat Baltimore, which nobody's seen happening. And the Baltimore's dealing with injuries on that side with Lamar Jackson, and there's just a lot of problems in Baltimore. And it started great, but it's not looking very good right now for them. The Browns, on the other hand, has Jameis Winston. We know what we get with him. We understand his mechanics. We've seen enough of him in regards to what he's capable of doing. He showed it in Tampa Bay in the 20,000 K club, and he's there and all that good stuff. But none of that, none of the accolades, none of the numbers equivalent to actually winning games that he is supposed to win. Games that he starts, he needs to finish. And I'm talking about finishing by making the right reads, not in the double coverages. But again, looked good against Baltimore. We'll see what it looks like against at times, stingy Chargers defense. In order for the Chargers to win this one, they need to blitz early and often, disguise the blitzes, and then in turn make sure that their secondary does their job and stop those would-be passes from Jameis Winston. On the other side of that ball, Nick Chubb, relatively, he came back from injury. It happened against Pittsburgh last year, so it's good to see him up and running literally. And had some carries and had some yards, but not much, not a big highlight reel for Nick. And he's getting back in the swing of things. It takes time for guys to get back into motion, literally, to play at game speed. He's not there yet. I think the Browns lose another one, even though they're at home against the Chargers.
Yeah, and I'm in that same vein. There is the Chargers get this done. I don't believe in the Browns, and of course, Jameis Winston is, every time you have a backup quarterback come in for the first time and it's not complete chaos surrounding it, they usually have a pretty good day. So that's where I think this falls off. He had a good day against Baltimore. They won that game also because Baltimore decided to get cute and not run the ball. They only gave Derrick Henry 11 carries. If you look at what they've done all year, their 3 losses are because they didn't give Derrick Henry the ball. So I don't credit the Browns with a lot of that. I credit Baltimore losing that game more than the Browns winning it. The Chargers, on the other hand, they're headed into Cleveland, but the biggest thing is they're relatively healthy. Some of their losses that they've had were because they had injuries around that team. They're getting those guys back, and Herbert is much more healthy now after his ankle injury. So, I mean, a lot of things make it look better for the Bolts than it does for the Browns. Some of that may just be bias because the Browns find ways to lose games all the time. So I think that'll probably be the case here as well. they'll find a way to drop this game.
Yeah, I agree. I'm with you guys. Let's move on to our best bets. And again, to recap, we're 14-6 over the last 8 shows. So that's 70% in my book. And let's try to keep it going. I'm going to start off with mine. And I'm going into the prop bet field for the first time this season. Hopefully that's not a bad thing. And it's a game that we didn't talk about, but I think Alvin Kamara is going to have a huge day against the Carolina Panthers. It's almost getting to the point where a lot of my prop bets are whoever is playing Carolina. So he looks pretty cheap here in terms of receiving yards. And he's currently right now 35 or more receiving yards at even money. And I can also step up like Rudy likes to do, 45 or more yards. I'm getting plus 185. So I like a little pizza money bets on both of those. And we'll just, for the purposes of the show, we'll go 35 and over because it's even money. But know that I'm going to put another little pizza with pepperoni on it with the plus 185 over 45 yards. And if you like Olave in this situation too, over 70 yards to me seems to be a pretty darn good chance of happening. And that's minus 115. But for the bet on the show, it's Alvin Kamara. Over 35 receiving yards. Rudy, what's your best bet?
I'm going to take Kirk Cousins, and here's why. Kirk Cousins, a guy people love to hate, and even at times I feel like I'm hating on him, but I'm really not. And he's, the over is 269, which is relative, and it could certainly happen. Why? Because, well, Dallas can't stop the run, and they can't pass, downfield consistently and over 30 plus yards, 50 plus yards by Dak Prescott. Whereas, you've seen it last week when Jaden Daniels took on the Chicago Bears. The Chicago Bears thought they won the game. Well, and then there's Jaden Daniels who throws a Hail Mary for a touchdown to win the game, which was probably a bet all into itself. I think Kirk Cousins also finds himself in that category of late game heroics. To win this, but the over for him slated at 249 yards. I think it's probably more than that. So I'm going to take the over on that one, and Kirk Cousins is my best bet.
Yeah, I like that one too. I think I wouldn't be surprised if he goes for 350. He's kind of due, and he's that type of guy that when he gets hot, that could be achieved in the third quarter, in my opinion. Bo, what's your best bet?
I like the over of the Dolphins and Bills at 49. This feels like a game that could become a track meet right away. And that's kind of what I'm looking for here. Even though the Bills defense has been better than we thought they were going to be this year, the Dolphins is not. The Dolphins don't play defense at all. They're very similar to the Jags in that way. But they have some race cars out there to catch the ball. So, they got 3 really fast guys. They're all on the field. They're all healthy. Tua is back, who has a connection with those guys. You on the other side, you have the Bills. They, have Amari now. I think this is going to be one of those games where probably 65 points are scored. So 49 seems like a deal. I would take the over there.
I like that too. Great show, guys. I know Bo has a show coming up here in about 8 minutes, his own show. So tune into that. You'll be glad you did. It's a great show. And Rudy, thanks for joining us. Rudy does the Rude Dog Show. He's had some awesome guests on that show in the last couple of weeks. And he's also Los Angeles area Fox personality, right?
Actually, Central Valley. So I'm Central 5 hours
Valley.
North. Yes, I'm a Central Valley guy. Not to be confused with the Valley girl, but the Valley guy. And you know what? You mentioned something that was quite interesting in that I've also had Mike Ditka on as well.
Oh, wow.
On the 85 Bears, and we're talking about that. And he's not as much of a broadcast guy as he is. He's really not. He thought it was a joke. He thought it was a hoax. Like, why would I even ask him that question? I'm sure he probably had a cigar in his mouth when he said that.
That's awesome. Well, I'll let you guys go. Thanks, everyone, for watching. Always remember, it's so important. You want to have fun with this. So bet with your head, not over it. Don't force any bets just to get the action. And then may all the wins be yours.